A 50-Year Journey Come Full Circle, written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose, and we are on chapter 16 in reading the book, and it's called Circumstantial Evidence. People are funny. No matter how much Bigfoot evidence I share with them, they always want me to show them more. I'm convinced that 95% of Bigfoot researchers must live in the state of Missouri, the show-me state. There's also the possibility that 95% of Bigfoot researchers are direct descendants of Doubting Thomas. He refused to believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ unless he saw him with his own eyes, touched the wound on his side and the wounds on his hands. He wasn't going to believe the witness testimony of the other disciples who did see him after Jesus' resurrection. Talk about a hard sell. Some people demand that you do things their way in order to satisfy them, even though their way is producing little, if any, evidence at all. In actuality, they should be doing things my way because my way is producing results. Nope. Not good enough for them. Some individuals are extremely narcissistic and think that the world revolves around them and their demands. They want what they want, and they want it now. Give me, give me, give me. Over the years, I've been sarcastically asked where all of my trail cam pictures or videos are. I remind them that when I was actually using the high-tech equipment in the past, we never captured a Bigfoot forest person on film or video. We did catch a black bear once, licking the lens of the video camera, and obtained a nice shot down its throat. Other than that, we got absolutely nothing significant. Then I reverse their question on them and ask them, where are all their pictures and videos of the Bigfoot forest people? Naturally, they don't have the very thing that they're demanding me to produce for them. I've learned over the years that trail cams and video cameras function as repellent to the Bigfoot forest people. They get frustrated with me and say something like, well, if you have them so close to you every night, then you should be able to produce a picture or video. The silly knuckleheads never let it sink in through their thick heads that the reason why we have them up close and personal every night is because we aren't trying to take their pictures. We're simply interested in building a trusting relationship with them. I encourage them to put their high-tech equipment away and do likewise. Some have honestly confessed to me that they're too afraid to do what I'm doing out in the field. They prefer to keep the Bigfoot forest people at a distance. We're talking about big names in Bigfootdom who fear the dark, fear being vulnerable, and fear that the Bigfoot forest people are going to hurt them, kidnap them, or kill them. They're not willing to allow logic to override their irrational fears. Like if the Bigfoot forest people wanted them dead, they would be dead 100 times over already by now. Let's face it, most Bigfoot evidence is circumstantial at best. Without a body, we will never have direct evidence that the Bigfoot forest people exist. Please do not misinterpret this factual statement as some kind of pro-kill endorsement. I'm not pro-kill, and we can't kill them anyway. By the way, anyone who claims that they have killed a Bigfoot forest person is a liar. I'll explain why later in the book. Anyway, my point is that all any Bigfoot researcher has is circumstantial evidence. Now, between you and me, I believe that Bigfoot researchers over the decades have collected enough circumstantial evidence combined with witness testimony to prove that the Bigfoot forest people exist. A jury of their peers would agree. In other words, we don't actually need a body to prove that they exist. Nevertheless, there's enough Missourians and doubting Thomases out there in society that they will never accept the existence of the Bigfoot forest people based on circumstantial evidence and eyewitness testimony. It's a hopeless cause. Well, just so I'm clear, I'm not writing my book for them, because it doesn't matter what I or anyone else says or what evidence we provide. They're simply not going to believe it unless they see Bigfoot with their own eyes. Doubters are going to doubt, and haters are going to hate. It's in their DNA. Hopefully, they'll have their own life-changing encounters someday. Instead, I'm writing this book for kind people with good hearts and open minds. Those individuals who don't need to see direct evidence to believe that they actually exist. Instead, they're open to being influenced by convincing circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Therefore, to help you understand what I mean is that circumstantial evidence in a trial, which is not directly from an eyewitness or participant, requires some reasoning to prove a fact. There is a public perception that such evidence is weak, like all they have is circumstantial evidence. But the probable conclusion from the circumstances may be so strong that there can be little doubt as to a vital fact. Beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case and a preponderance of the evidence in a civil case. Particularly in criminal cases, eyewitness, like I saw Frankie shoot Johnny, type evidence is often lacking and may be unreliable. So circumstantial evidence becomes essential. Prior threats to a victim, fingerprints found at the scene of the crime, ownership of the murder weapon, and the accused being seen in the neighborhood certainly point to the suspect as being the killer. But each bit of evidence is circumstantial. Law.com. During my years of Bigfoot research, I've collected a lot of convincing circumstantial evidence from my various research areas. We've collected Bigfoot forest people footcasts of all sizes on a variety of mountainsides. We've collected toddler tracks, juvenile tracks, adolescent tracks, and adult tracks. The longest set of tracks actually came from Zorth in the Southern Oregon Interaction Area, the SOIA. They were 26 inches long, 11 inches across at the toes, and 7 inches across at the heel. If you pay close attention, finding and collecting the Bigfoot tracks out in the wilderness can provide more information than just who left the tracks behind. For example, in one research area, Dr. William York and I found a set of tracks that were obviously made by a young juvenile and adult female. They were walking up a hill onto a logging road. Once they reached the logging road, you could clearly see that the young juvenile was playfully walking across the dead-end cul-de-sac. The young one was digging his heel in the ground and then sliding his right foot forward, then digging the other heel in the ground and sliding the left foot forward. We could picture the scenario in our minds and enjoyed a laugh together. We had fun trying to mimic the young one. On another occasion, during my old school researcher days, we found an 18-inch track across a gully where a Bigfoot forest person was watching our camp during the previous night. We had a media crew out there with us that night, and the producer was extremely angry with the cameraman for not bringing enough juice to power up their night vision camera for more than 30 minutes. The really cool thing was that 6 months later, approximately 6 miles away from our campsite, we actually found the same track on another mountainside. It was a perfect match, including a tiny outgrowth on the side of the foot in the same exact spot. Finally, regarding cool Bigfoot track stories, I had a guest, Andrea Billups with me at the Southern Oregon Habituation Area, SOHA. Although she is a Bigfoot Forest person enthusiast, she was not a camper. She is a girly girl. Pink is the color of her national flag. Yet, to her credit, she didn't let her lack of camping experience or fear of sleeping out in the open on cots deter her from coming along with me. However, she did have conditions. She wanted me to place her cot parallel to my F-150 pickup truck and about 3 feet away from it. I had to place the table at the foot of her cot. I had to be sleeping close by on the other side of her cot, and we had to place the head of our cots near the brush. In short, Andrea wanted to be surrounded on all sides, so there would be no room for the Bigfoot Forest people to come up to her at night while she slept and check her out. Guess what? The next morning, Miss Andrea was so shocked to find juvenile tracks around her cot. Based on the fingerprints that we found on the floorboard of my F-150 pickup truck, a juvenile managed to shimmy across the ground on his back underneath my truck. Then he used his hands to grab the floorboard and pull himself out from underneath the truck. Needless to say, Miss Andreas was blown away that in spite of the fortress built around her, they were still able to get to her anyway. Speaking of fingerprints, we managed to collect the hand cast out of the ground. In my early old school days, we had set up a bait pile for the dumb giant mountain apes and raked out the ground around the tempting food. Well, they weren't so dumb. One of them got on his knees and leaned on one hand while grabbing the food with his other hand. In other words, the indentations on the ground clearly told a story that the Bigfoot Forest person noticed that the ground was raked and did everything possible to avoid the raked area. By the way, this wasn't the first time that we saw circumstantial evidence showing them avoiding our other raked areas. During my time in the Southern Oregon Habituation Area, SOHA, while utilizing the stainless steel dog food bowls, otherwise known as gifting bowls, we were able to collect numerous fingerprints and handprints. Please remember that I would wear surgical gloves, clean the bowls out, place the food in them, and then carry the bowls out about 150 feet from the SOHA base camp. Then I would retrieve the bowls in the morning with witnesses present while wearing surgical gloves again. In short, any fingerprints found on the gifting bowls did not come from me or any members of my research party. Every morning at sunrise, when we would go out to retrieve the gifting bowls before the forest woke up, it was like Christmas morning. I loved taking my guests out there and watching them respond to what we would find waiting for us. What food did they take? What food did they leave behind? Was there any evidence of little critters or birds hitting the gifting bowls? Never, I might add. There was never any evidence that little critters or birds were hitting the gifting bowls. Anyway, then the best of all possible circumstantial evidence, were there any fingerprints or handprints on the gifting bowls? When my guests saw all of the circumstantial evidence in the gifting bowls and around the gifting bowls, fingerprints on the ground, combined with the fingerprints and handprints, they were sold. They were amazed. Santa delivered the goodies in the SOHA stockings. My guests learned that I don't lie and I don't hoax. If I say it happened, guess what? It happened. All of my guests left SOHA as believers. We also found very large non-human handprints on the windows of our Suburban and Subaru. With the help of Jamie Alvarez, we were able to lift the handprint from the window and secure them to a large piece of paper. Cynthia works for a law enforcement agency as a justice system support supervisor. She makes sure that the data is available to a variety of law enforcement agencies to help catch the bad guys. She took the prints to their fingerprint specialist of 20 years. He concluded that they weren't human. He also concluded that they didn't come from any known primate that he had ever studied at the zoo in Seattle, Washington. Now, that's pretty cool. Speaking of eating food out of the gifting bowls, when you put gifting bowls out between 3 and 9 times per month for a total of 5 years in Soha, you begin to recognize patterns. For example, the Bigfoot forest people seldom, if ever, took the food on the first night. Although we could hear and see them hanging around the perimeter, it was like there was some social custom that prevented them from taking the food on the first night it was offered. Occasionally, when I would arrive at Soha, I wouldn't put out any food on the first night. Then I would put it out for the first time on the second night. Guess what? They wouldn't take the food on the first night it was offered, even though it was offered during the second night we were there. Very fascinating. The only violation of this social custom occurred when the toddler was allowed to start visiting the perimeter of the Soha base camp with his adolescent brother and juvenile sister. It was really cute. The toddler was just as impulsive as any young human child. Also, just like a human child, the toddler would pull the sandwich halves apart, lick out the peanut butter from one half, and then lick out the raspberry jam from the other slice of bread, and then put them back together and place them back inside the gifting bowl. The toddler did the same thing with the Oreo cookie. As time passed, the toddler learned to comply with the social custom of not taking the food on the first night it was offered. On a side note, just a brief rabbit trail moment. When the toddler was introduced to the perimeter of the Soha base camp, the daddy walked up the hillside and walked completely around the entire perimeter, as loud and heavy-footed as possible, 2 nights in a row. He was clearly sending us a message. That's my baby, and you better not mess with him. Trust me, we never tried to mess with any of them. We just talked, laughed, sang, played instruments, whistled tunes, and played recorded music. Back to the gifting bowls. After about 3 years of placing the gifting bowls about 150 feet from the perimeter of the base camp, I decided to change things up. I decided to place the gifting bowls only 25 feet away from the perimeter. Although the bowls were still hidden behind trees and brush from our viewing them from the base camp, Daddy was not pleased with the change. As we sat there in the dark in the middle of camp, we could hear them at the gifting bowls. When one of the kids reached for the food in the gifting bowls, Daddy let out a very loud, gruffy, grunty whoop. It was so loud, we almost fell over backwards in our chairs. How did we know that Daddy responded to one of his kids reaching for the food? Well, the next morning we checked out the bowls and found only one chocolate-covered peanut missing. Even though we moved the gifting bowls back to their original positions, Daddy wouldn't allow his children to take any food from the gifting bowls during the remainder of that trip to Soha. He apparently put us in timeout. The following trip, he allowed them to take food again. During one trip, when I placed the sandwich halves inside the gifting bowls along the edge, I placed 10 pieces of candy corn in a circle in the center of the bowl with the white tips facing toward the center. The next morning, when we went out to retrieve the gifting bowls, the 10 pieces of candy corn were found to be repositioned inside the bowl into 2 straight lines of 5. After the second night, the circle of 10 candy corn were repositioned inside the bowl into a triangle shape. Please Tell me what little critter or bird is going to rearrange geometric figures into different geometric figures inside a gifting bowl filled with other food. That's right, none. No little critters or birds can engage in such behaviors. Just not possible. On another occasion, Johnny Manson and I went to check on the gifting bowls during December of 2013. Although there was some food missing, the major circumstantial evidence that we found was several peanut M&Ms in the bowl that had been obviously sucked on and then spit out back inside the bowl. They were sitting there waiting for us in a pool of saliva. We cleaned out a Tupperware container with rubbing alcohol and then placed the M&Ms and saliva inside and sealed the container with duct tape. It's been sitting in our freezer for the past 3 years, waiting to be analyzed by a trustworthy DNA expert. Why haven't we had them analyzed yet? Well, because it costs thousands and thousands of dollars. Also, the analyst has to be trustworthy. In other words, some of the go-to experts that most people have relied upon in the past appear to be self-serving rather than sincerely seeking the truth. When the right opportunity comes along, we will have them analyzed. Once we placed a basket out in the gifting area and put food inside of it. In order to get the food out, the individual had to hold it open. When we came back a week later to check on the basket, the lid had been torn off of it. We found fingerprints on the bottom of the basket. We also found long strands of black hair caught by the woven basket. I sent the hair samples off to an analyst in Australia who confirmed that they were not human hairs, black bear hairs, or any known primate hairs. That was nice confirmation. No, he doesn't analyze saliva. Some other circumstantial evidence that we discovered in Soha was the massive tree structures on the ridgeline. They picked up large trees and would move them around, lean them on one another, and weave them between each other to create designs and structures. On other occasions, they would take a tree and snap it about 9 feet off the ground and then lay it over the top of another tree that they bent over in order to hold it down after they wove that bent tree in and out of other trees in front of it. There was no way that structures like this were the result of snow snaps or windstorms. They were intentionally manipulated by very large upright beings. On another occasion, Cynthia and I left the Soha base camp to go for a hike. When we came back a while later, we found about 20 pine cones laid in a row on the trail leading back to camp. At the end of the straight line of pine cones was a geometrical design made of sticks, pine cones, and rocks. None of that was on the trail when we left the camp for our hike. However, it was amazing to find it waiting for us upon our return to camp. On another occasion, while I was in Soha on a solo trip, Atlas and I hiked away from camp for about 2 hours. When we returned to the base camp, I found one of his old hollow chew sticks with a feather stuck inside of it waiting for me on my cot. That was an awesome gift from them to me. Oh, I neglected to mention that within a minute of our initial arrival at Soha, Atlas and I were greeted with a rock that was tossed into camp by my feet. 1 minute later, a large pine cone was tossed into camp by my feet. That was their way of saying hello to me. Is that enough circumstantial evidence for you? Are you convinced yet that I've been habituating with a family of Bigfoot forest people? Just in case, I still need to push you over the edge into belief. I would like to remind you that I had been using a bionic ear parabolic microphone dish and a Sony digital recorder to capture the Bigfoot forest people talking, singing, humming, whistling, whooping, hooting, barking, and tree knocking. Would you like to listen to them? Lean closer to the video. Do you hear them? Aha! I knew you'd love them. Well, there's more, and all you have to do is go online, type in XANUE, Janu.com, and listen to a plethora of recordings, and they're real. By the way, I'm not talking about listening to hours of recordings. I'm actually talking about you needing to take days and days to listen to all my recordings. If you're smart, you'll scroll down to the bottom of the page and begin with the oldest recordings, and then move forward to the newer recordings. Oh, please don't forget to listen to them with your headphones, not your cell phone speaker, not your earbuds, not your crappy computer speakers. Please, listen to them with your headphones. Well, there you have it. There's my circumstantial evidence. If you would like to look at pictures or read more about my evidence, please go to my website, janu.com. There are lots of pictures there, along with blogs and other interesting information to learn from. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me at bigfootdoctor@yahoo.com. We have over 8,000 members who have lots of good information to share with you. Many of them are still learning about the Bigfoot forest people phenomena, just like you. That's the end of Chapter 16 of the book, Bigfoot, A 50-Year Journey Come Full Circle, written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. Stay tuned for Chapter 17, Multiple Eyewitness Testimonies. I'm Willi Rose.